Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you a simple studio lighting setup that you can use to help present your bedroom assets more clearly in Maya. And it's not just your bedroom assets; it's really any asset. As this setup, it works for pretty much everything that you need to present. So you haven't formally covered lighting yet, and this is not intended to be a full lighting lesson. We're going to go into that next term. But for now, what I want you to do is I want you to understand the basic purpose of the setup and what each part is doing and how you can import it into your own scene. So the setup includes a studio backdrop, and this is also known as an infinity curve. And it also includes an HDR light, which we use for things like general environment lighting. And then there's these three area lights over here, and we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. But we've got a key light, we've got a full light, and then this over here is a rim light. So the goal is really just to give you a cleaner, more controlled render environment so that your model, your textures, and your materials can all be seen properly. All right, so what is the setup for? Before we look at how to create or import the setup, it's important for us to understand what it's even for. And when you render an object in an empty scene, it can often feel very disconnected from the space around it. And in fact, I can actually give you an example right over here. If I just hide these two things and I click render, you kind of give an example of what I'm referring to here, right? Often the lighting, it can feel sometimes too flat. Sometimes it can feel too harsh. It can feel very inconsistent, I should rather say. Sometimes the background, it distracts from the object, and sometimes the object itself, it doesn't feel grounded because there's simply no surface for shadows to fall onto. Now, a studio lighting setup, it helps to solve all of that. If I just bring back these things, then you immediately start to see a difference. So it gives us a simple controlled space where the object can sit and where shadows can be visible and where the lighting itself can be shaped in a more intentional way. It doesn't replace your final environment or scene design at all, but it gives you a clean way to present your work, especially when you need to show the quality of your modeling, your texturing, your shading, and even the rendering itself. So let's have a look at the infinity curve, and that's this thing right over here, right? So I'm just going to isolate that. And an infinity curve is basically, it's a studio backdrop where the floor, as you can see, it smoothly curves upward into the background. So instead of having a hard corner where the floor meets the wall, the curve, it removes that visible edge, right? And therefore it's less distracting. And this is useful because it creates this cleaner background for the render, and it allows the object to sit on the surface, but without that distraction that I just spoke of. So in this setup, the infinity curve, it's built from real simple geometry. It just simply starts as a cube, and then the unnecessary sides of that cube are deleted, leaving only a floor and a back wall. And then from there, the corner between the floor and the wall is beveled to create a nice smooth curve. And I'm going to show you that in just a moment. So it's a very common studio presentation technique, and you'll see it used in things like product renders and turntables and clay renders and general portfolio presentations, because it keeps the focus on the subject itself. Okay. Now, if you were to create one from scratch, you can start just by creating a cube. Let's pause this render, and then we can increase the cube. As I already mentioned, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to just select the faces we don't need, and then we're going to delete them. And then we're going to grab this edge over here, and I'm going to bevel it. And this time I want chamfer to be turned on because I want it to actually give this curvature. But I'm just going to increase the segments like so. And then from here, I can play with the fraction until such time as I've got an amount of curve that I'm happy with. And then we can always make further adjustments to this till such time as we've got it to the size that we actually want. So something like that will be more than good enough. And then a lot of the time what's going to happen is that the faces are going to be reversed, and we've already encountered this enough to hopefully know how to fix this. We're just going to select all the faces. We're going to shift right click. We're going to say face normals and reverse normals. And there we go. That's your infinity curve done. And that's how you create one. So the next part of the setup is the HDR and the Skydome light. So I'm just going to get rid of this duplicate because we don't need that. Now in Arnold, the way that we create an HDR is we come over here to Arnold and we say lights, and we just select this Skydome light. And a Skydome light, it wraps lighting around the scene using a very particular kind of environment image called an HDR. And in this case, the HDR provides general lighting and reflections. Now, the important thing to understand is that HDR is not just a background image. It can also contribute to the way the object is lit and how reflections appear on the materials themselves. So I can give a little bit of an example here. And then if I select this material and I come over here and I just make this very metallic, and then if I dull this roughness down, look at all these nice reflections I'm getting on this material from the environment light. Now, if I remove that, it looks very boring and it looks very, very plain and it looks incredibly fake and CG, right? So environment lights do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to bringing a sense of realistic ambient light and reflections into our scene. Now, next up, we've got the area lights. So for the area lights, in fact, before we go any further, let me just turn this back to what it was. All right, now for the area lights, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select one and I'm going to hit this little icon here. It's the circle with what looks like the marching ants around it. And that's just the isolate selected. So what Arnold is doing is that it's showing the contribution of only that light, which is really useful whenever it comes to setting up your lights. So we're going to start here. This is the key light. Key light is the main light. It's generally the strongest light in the setup and it's responsible for the main direction of the lighting. It helps define the form of the object and it creates the most noticeable highlights and shadows. There's something that you'll always hear me say, which is that key is king. So you really want to make sure that you've got your key light sorted out first. And from there, every other light that you use lands up just playing a supporting role to help establish what the look of your render should be. So if we move on from there and we have a look at the full light over here, a full light is generally softer and it's weaker compared to a key light. Its job is not to remove all of the shadows, but it's to gently lift the dark areas so that the object doesn't become too contrasty or too difficult to read. And you'll notice that here for this example, I'm using the full light just to illuminate the background a bit. And that helps to separate the main subject from the background. And it creates a very nice sense of like spatial depth and a great sense of presentation as well. And if we move on, the final light over here, this is light, and the rim light is generally placed behind or to the side of an object, and its job is to catch the edge of the object and to help separate it from the background, as you can see. So this can be especially useful if the object is dark, or if it blends too much in the backdrop, or like I was saying, it once again helps to just really create this lovely sense of separation between the main subject itself and the background. So together these lights, it gives you a nice simple studio lighting structure, and the key light creates the main direction, the full light softens the shadows, and the rim light helps separate the object from the background itself. So the reason this setup works is because it's giving you a clean structure in which to base your renders off of. Right, so you've got this infinity curve, you've got this HDR that's giving this nice sense of environment lighting and more realistic and interesting reflections. And then we've got the key full and the rim light that's all helping to really kind of bring the focus onto the subject itself, and also to help pool the light around the subject. So a good render, it's not just about the model or the textures. The lighting also plays a big role in whether the viewer can actually understand the form, the materials, and even the surface detail. So at this stage, I want to be clear in that I'm not expecting you to become lighting specialists. The aim is simply for you to recognize that lighting is part of presentation and that a controlled setup can make your work much, much easier to read. So let's have a look at how it is that you can import this into your own scene. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually delete all of this so that I don't have anything in the scene. And delete the camera as well. Now, at this point, hopefully you've already downloaded it and even the HDR as well. It would be on you to make sure that that HDR is copied into your source images folder of your set Maya project, and that you are actually working from a set Maya project at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click on File, I'm going to say Import, and I'm just going to navigate to the folder that I have it in over here. And because it's a Maya file, you want to make sure that when you click on Import, that your files of type are set to Maya scenes. Okay, and then I'm just going to say Import, and you're going to see that it's going to come in. But the thing is that notice how on my side this comes in, but this background, it's got this really bright green color. Now, if you import something and for whatever reason Maya couldn't assign or couldn't understand what material is meant to be assigned to an object, then it's going to show it as this very bright green color. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this object. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say assign existing material. And for me, the material is already in the scene. It's this grid underscore dark gray. If you don't have the material, then that's not a problem. You can just assign a new material and then adjust it from there. So that's all that you really need to do. And then from there, you can, if you click render, you should start to see the backdrop and the lights. But the thing is that we still got this environment light. Now notice how this environment light right now, it's no longer showing the map. And that's because generally you're going to have to reconnect that environment light. So if we click on it and we come here to the attribute editor, come here to color, just click on the checkerboard icon. This little window will pop up and I'm just going to say file. And then when you click on the folder icon, it's going to take you straight to the source images folder. And then from there, provided you've actually copied the map in there, you should be able to grab it quite easily. Now, I don't store my maps in this particular folder. I'm going to use another directory for that. And it's this directory right here. And I'm just going to grab the exact same map that you've got. And I'm going to say open. And then when I click on render, see what a significant difference that actually makes. Now, you are welcome to adjust the setup, although I will just say that the setup is prepared in a very particular way. And not to be funny, it's prepared in a way that works. So, if you do see something that you would maybe like to tweak, you are more than welcome to do so. But what I would advise that you do is not to make a lot of little changes together, but to rather make a change, render, see what that change actually does, and then at least that way you can understand where something has gone wrong if you don't like the result. So before doing your final render, what I would advise that you do is just to check the following. Make sure your object is sitting properly on your infinity curve, okay? Make sure the camera frames the object clearly as well, all right? You can jump here into your camera view and you can use things like the action safe and the title safe just to at least help give some kind of a guide as to framing. Make sure your key light is giving the object a clear main direction of light. Make sure the full light's not making the render completely flat. Make sure the rim light is helping to separate the object from the background, and make sure the HDR is actually contributing to the reflections and the overall lighting without overpowering the scene. And that's the reason why the setup of the scene, it works, is because of the fact that all of those things have already been accounted for and it's been set up in a very particular way. So remind yourself that the setup, it's a practical helper for your current project, right? It's there to show you what a really good example of something is. You're not expected to fully understand lighting yet, but you should start noticing how lighting affects the way your work is presented. So use the provided Maya file as a starting point, import it into your scene, place the object correctly, and make small adjustments where needed. The goal is simple. It's to help you produce cleaner, more readable renders that really show off all your hard work when it comes to modeling, texturing, and even your materials in the best possible way.